What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 36 running back rankings for week 7 of the NFL season. I do think this is kind of a tough week at the running back spot. Got a couple of bye weeks. We have some injuries. We also have some normally pretty reliable running backs with some tough matchups. So even more important this week to kind of get that position correct. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe. But let's just dive right into the rankings here. We are going to start off in tier 1. I have 4 tier 1 running backs. It's going to be Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams, Kenneth Walker. Wouldn't get too caught up in the order of these guys. If you have them on your roster, they're obviously going to be locked into your lineup. Now, before we do jump into tier 2, I just want to run through like 3 of the players that I'm assuming are going to be out this week. The first one is Jonathan Taylor. It definitely does not seem like he's trending in the right direction. If he does end up playing, he's obviously going to be a start. But for these rankings, I'm going to be ranking those other running backs, not Jonathan Taylor. Then we have Travis Etienne with his shoulder. Don't think he's going to play this week. And then Ramondre Stevenson did travel with the Patriots, but he hasn't practiced this week. I don't think things are looking great. So he still has some hope of playing, but I don't think it's super likely. So those are the 3 running backs that I am assuming are out this week. But now looking at tier 2, starting off here with Tony Pollard, you have Tajay Spears, who is probably going to miss this week. The Bills have allowed the second most points per game to the running back position, and Tony Pollard has seen really strong usage to start off the year. So especially with Spears out, I think Tony Pollard is a smash play this week. Then I have Joe Mixon, who's just been an absolute beast in his 2 healthy games, 26 plus PPR points in both of those. I feel like he's a locked in start. Then going with Breece Hall, I think his usage in week 6 was very encouraging. Took 23 of the 28 opportunities. I'm hoping the Devontae Adams addition can kind of unlock this offense, up his touchdown upside. Rising tides lifts all boats. So hope that's the effect here for Breece Hall. Then I have Chuba Hubbard going up against the Commanders. Does not seem like Jonathan Brooks is going to make his debut here. Did not practice on Thursday. I was someone who really liked Jonathan Brooks heading into the season. I thought he was going to be a potential league winner. The way this torn ACL has kind of continued to linger is pretty concerning. Like, there were reports before the season that he might be ready to go for week 1. Now, he wasn't back after the mandatory 4. Now, he might not even be making his debut in week 7. It's not great. Chuba's been super productive, 20.7 PPR points per game with Dalton. I think you continue to fire him up as a running back 1. And then the final guy in this tier is going to be Bijan Robinson. Coming off the best game of the season in week 6, 25.5 PPR points. But there were a couple of issues here. He was out carried by Tyler Algier, and he also did not dominate the goal line opportunities. Algier had 6 of the 8 goal line snaps. Bijan Robinson only took 2 of them. So I still think he's playable as an RB1, but definitely not in that high-end RB1 area, which is where he was drafted. Now looking at tier 3, within this tier we have some running backs that are a little bit banged up, also some running backs that have some tough matchups. We're going to start it off here with one of those tough matchups. It's Jahmyr Gibbs going up against the Vikings. The Vikings have allowed the second fewest points per game to the running back position. The reason why I do prefer Jahmyr Gibbs over a guy like David Montgomery this week is I do think this could be the first time, or one of the first times this season, where we get a favorable game script here for Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be better off in a trailing game script where the passing volume is going to be higher. You can really unlock his upside as a pass catcher. The Lions are 2.5-point dogs, so it's not like Vegas is expecting them to get blown out or anything, but this could be a very competitive. Maybe they're down early on and they need to have a little bit more passing volume. I think that benefits Jahmyr Gibbs. So even though it's a bad matchup, still think he's a fine play. Then I have Jordan Mason, also in a bad matchup here. The Chiefs have allowed the fewest points per game to the running back position. Was dealing with a shoulder injury heading into this week. If he's playing, you're still starting him. Then I have Brian Robinson dealing with a knee injury. Not quite sure if he's going to play this week. If he can give it a go, he is a smash play as long as he's healthy, because the Panthers have allowed the most points per game to the running back position. So hopefully he can get back here and take advantage of this matchup. If he's out, you fire up Austin Eckler as a very, very strong play. After B-Rob, I'm going to be going with J.K. Dobbins here. He is coming off a season-high 27 opportunities, has a decent matchup here against the Cardinals. Doesn't have the most receiving upside, but they're force-feeding him on the ground. The Chargers clearly want to be very run-heavy, so I think he's a very strong play. Then after Dobbins, I have David Montgomery, the other side of that Jahmyr Gibbs running back tandem here. Like I said, it's a bad matchup, but Dave Montgomery has been super productive. He is the running back 8 in points per game. I still think he's a fine play as like a high-end RB2. Then I have James Cook, missed the week 6 game. Looks like he's going to be good to go here for week 7. I do think he's in this interesting spot because he's been super productive to start off the season. He's been a really nice fantasy option. But we saw in the game where he was not able to play, Ray Davis looked really good. Ty Johnson looked very good. This hasn't been a Bills team that like really wants to force feed James Cook. So I'm a little bit worried that maybe he loses a little bit of his opportunity share. I still think he's going to be the running back 1, but do we see a little bit more Ray Davis moving forward, just kind of shifting these running backs in and out? Guess we'll wait and see. Still think he's a nice RB2 play, but a little bit worried about a potential committee here, or I guess even like more of a committee. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be James Conner, dealing with an ankle injury, but when he's been healthy on the field, his usage has been very strong. Like him here as a high-end RB2. Now moving into tier 4, going to start off this tier with Josh Jacobs. Definitely a tough start to the season. He's maxed out at like 16.4 PPR points. It's also just a tough matchup here against the Texans. They've allowed the 5th fewest points per game to the running back position. I do think Josh Jacobs is going to be better moving forward, but I don't really want to project like this huge breakout game, especially within a bad matchup. Then I'm going to go with Chase Brown here going up against the Browns. It seemed like he started to pull away from Zach Moss in this backfield in week 6. 13 opportunities compared to Zach Moss's 7. Chase Brown has scored 14 plus PPR points in the last 3 games, so he's been productive. The usage continues to shift in his favor. Definitely a very, very valuable role, potentially being the Bengals running back 1. Then I have Aaron Jones going up against the Lions. He's still dealing with that hip injury. There's no guarantee he's going to be good to go this week, but if he does play, I think he's a fine mid-tier RB2. He's been productive. It is kind of a tough matchup here, though, against the Lions, who have allowed the 3rd fewest points per game to the running back spot. I will say, though, no Aiden Hutchinson. Maybe that makes things easier. Guess we'll have to wait and see. Then I have Kareem Hunt going up against the Niners. I know we're getting CEH back this week. Maybe I'm off base here. I don't really see CEH coming in and making a huge impact. He's kind of been a non-factor over the last couple of years. Kareem Hunt's dominated the opportunities. 17 opportunities week 4, 28 opportunities week 5. I still think he's the guy to play here within this offense. Then I'm going to go with Devon Achane going up against the Colts. He's coming off of a concussion. He's still not going to have Tua. He has put up under 10 PPR points in his last 3, but I am slightly optimistic about this Dolphins offense coming out of the bye. I don't think they're going to be great, but I don't think they're going to be quite as awful as we saw in the first 3 games without Tua. I like Achane as the player. Just kind of hoping he can get back to the efficiency we saw last year. And then the last guy in this tier, it is going to be Najee Harris. He's coming off a season high 20.2 PPR points. Decent matchup here against the Jets, who really struggled to slow down the Bills' run game, and that was without James Cook. So you have Russ taking over. I think maybe that gives Najee a little bit more touchdown upside because I believe Justin Fields is leading all quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns. So he was definitely vulturing near the goal line. If those opportunities are going to Najee, I think he can have some more luck in the touchdown department. And then tier 5 here, kind of in an interesting spot. These are like the guys almost taking over for some injured running backs. The first one here, Antonio Gibson going up against the Jaguars. This is a really nice matchup here. The Jags have allowed the 5th most points per game to the running back spot. In week 6, without Ramondre, Antonio Gibson saw 17 opportunities. So I think he's a fine play if Ramondre does miss. Then we have Tank Bigsby in the other side of that matchup, likely without Travis Etienne. What I think is interesting here about Bigsby is that you would have assumed that with how productive he was early on in the season, with Etienne going down, he would step in and be the workhorse. That's not really what we saw last week. The usage was not great. He was actually outsnapped, ran less routes, and had fewer opportunities than Dearness Johnson. But I think a decent part of that was the game script. In this matchup here against the Patriots, they're decent-sized favorites. It's a good matchup. The Patriots have allowed the 6th most points per game to the running back spot. So I do think Tank Bigsby is maybe a better play than what the usage last week would suggest. And then the last guy in this tier, this is Austin Eckler, even if Brian Robinson is healthy, or at least if he's active. Like I said earlier on, most points per game allowed to the running back position. That's the Panthers. Last week, without B-Rob, he saw 14 of the 16 running back opportunities. So I think he's in like this high-end RB3 range with B-Rob. If B-Rob's out of the lineup, I think you fire him up. I mean, like potentially as high as a running back 1, just based on how strong this matchup is. And then moving into tier 6, going to start off this tier with just back-to-back Colts running backs. Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, like I talked about with JT. Not sure if he's going to play this week. Trey Sermon also has an injury to monitor. He's been limited this week with a knee injury. Tyler Goodson came in last week, had a very efficient 8 carries, 5 targets, so he had decent usage. It's a strong matchup here against the Dolphins, who have allowed the 3rd most points per game to the running back spot. So obviously some injuries we have to monitor with both Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon, but this is where I'd have these guys slotted in right now. Now, if Trey Sermon missed and we were without, both those top 2 running backs, then you probably bump Goodson somewhere up into like RB2 area, but I think we'll kind of get there if we get there. And then I have Tyrone Tracy going up against the Eagles. We also have Devin Singletary in this tier. He's dealing with a groin injury. It's kind of tough to predict what the dynamic will be between these 2 running backs because early on, when Singletary was healthy, he was obviously the clear running back 1. Singletary goes down. Tracy steps up, puts up 14 and 22.7 PPR points. He looked super impressive in those 2 opportunities where he got to be the lead back. So if Singletary's back this week, I'm not convinced he's going to step right back into his same workload. I think at the very least it's going to be a split. I think the question is just who is that split favoring. Right now I slightly prefer Tracy. If Singletary ends up missing, Tyrone Tracy, like worst case scenario, is like an RB2 play. I think he's a really nice option if Singletary misses. In between those guys, I have Zach Moss. Looking like the RB2 here now for the Bengals. I still don't think Chase Brown's like pulling away completely, but this was the worst usage we saw out of Zach Moss in week 6. Then I have Bucky Irving going up against the Ravens. This Bucky Irving situation is kind of frustrating because I was someone who liked Bucky Irving as a sleeper. I have him on a decent amount of my fantasy teams, and I felt like my thought process was so right heading into the year. It was like Bucky Irving isn't necessarily like this can't miss prospect, but you look at Rachaad White, he's really struggled with his efficiency. Are they going to want him to be the workhorse? Bucky Irving, could be like this handcuff option, could potentially take over the backfield. And I felt like the way I laid it out was, coming to fruition here. Rachaad White was struggling. Bucky Irving was earning more opportunities. Rachaad White goes down with injury. This is Bucky Irving's opportunity to take over this backfield, be the clear running back 1. And then just off the top ropes, Sean Tucker comes in and looks like an insane running back. So now we're potentially looking at a 3-headed committee here. Not great, especially in a really bad matchup here against the Ravens, who have allowed the 4th fewest points per game. Now, Rachaad White's status for this game is still up in the air, so that's something to monitor. But if this is a 3-headed committee, tough to get excited about it. I mean, you're riding the hot hand and you have to pick between one of 3 dudes. That is not ideal. I will say, though, if Rachaad White does not play, then Sean Tucker definitely could slot in, somewhere in this top 36. Running back 31, Devin Singletary, already talked about him. Running back 32, Tyler Algier, out-carried Bijan Robinson in week 6. Looks like he's going to have some decent weekly usage. Not a ton of receiving upside, but could have a decent workload on the ground, have an opportunity to get into the end zone. We also saw him take 6 out of 8 goal line snaps, so that's there for Algier. And then the last guy in this tier, Nick Chubb. Some people might think this is low, running back 33. I'm just expecting him to be very limited in his debut. Serious knee injury. I don't think they're going to, throw him into like this monster workload. Also keep in mind that this is a very, very bad Browns offense. So even if they're in a spot where they're like, picking the valuable touches for Nick Chubb, there might not be a whole lot of valuable opportunities out there. So I think it's great to see him back. Hopefully he looks good, but I would kind of temper your expectations early on here with Nick Chubb as he works his way back, into his full role. And then tier 7 here, final tier, pretty gross at this point, going with Dearness Johnson against the Patriots. Like I talked about with Bigsby, he did lead the team or the running backs in snaps, routes, and opportunities in week 6. So even though I do think it's a favorable game script for Bigsby, can't completely rule out Dearness Johnson. Then I have Alexander Madison. Zamir White seems like he might have a shot to play this week. He's been limited. If White is out, then I think you throw Madison into like this gross tier 6 area. If Zamir White's back, not a super fun play. And then Raheem Mostert, probably the running back 2 here for the Dolphins. Definitely seems a lot less desirable than what we thought heading into the year without Tua. But if you're super desperate, I could get, plug-in and play-in Raheem Mostert. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 36. If you guys have any questions, drop them down below. As the week develops, injuries, you guys can, leave new comments. But that's going to be the top 36 for now. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.